On this week's episode of the Leaders Series, we are joined by Luis Chibante. Luis Chibante is president and CEO of Golden Acre Farms. He began his journey in the greenhouse industry in 1991 with just 1.5 acres of wooden, plastic-covered starter houses and no computerized technology. Through vision, hard work, and innovation, he has grown Golden Acre Farms into a 61-acre state-of-the-art glass greenhouse facility as of 2025. With a continued commitment to advancing greenhouse technology and sustainable farming, Luis is leading the company towards its next milestone, an 80-acre expansion plan for 2026, solidifying Golden Acre Farms as a leader in high-tech agriculture. Now let's get into the episode with Luis. Welcome back, Dave and John.
It's really good to be back.
Great to be back.
You guys still haven't learned. 100 episodes in and you
One
haven't
time we'll
learned.
get it right.
Okay, we have a fantastic guest here with us today, too.
Today we're joined by Luis Chibante, President and CEO of Golden Acre Farms. Welcome, Luis.
Good morning, everybody.
Well, we have a really exciting episode today about navigating energy in modern greenhouse operations. To start off today's episode, how have energy costs evolved in greenhouse operations over the past decade? And honestly, I do think a lot of our listeners would be surprised to hear how energy intensive greenhouse operations can even be.
Correct. Yeah. Since we started 15 years ago, everything's changed so much, from pricing to efficiencies to technology. We were one of the first ones with HPS. We converted now to LEDs. And with LEDs, it keeps on growing and adapting every year. There's pros and cons to this. The cons is the energy pricing that doesn't stop going up. And in my opinion, it will never stop going up. But the good news is, you got tools out there that could make your place more efficient and more productive.
So, Louis, I'm so pleased to have you here. I know in the prelude we talk about how big the greenhouse industry here is in Ontario, specifically in Leamington, where you're based out of. And as Lysandra said, most customers don't know. We work with cement, we work with automotive players, but the greenhouse industry can be just as big, if not bigger, as far as their energy requirements. And I think our listeners would be shocked and, quite frankly, surprised how energy intensive it is. So my question, just for our listeners, is what percentage of typically a total operating cost does energy represent for a greenhouse specifically?
Obviously, it's a little bit different between greenhouse to greenhouse, depending on what you have, whether it's high-tech greenhouse with glass or even LEDs, HPS. So in our case, with the most efficient high-tech standards that we have, we're still looking at 10% in our case. But in a lot of cases, even it goes up to 20%.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point for our listeners. We have seen even higher as a percentage of operating cost.
Probably.
If you manage it really well, it certainly can have a huge impact to your bottom line if you do it properly. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? Because making this point that people don't understand that percentage, Dave's right. Iron and steel are cement regarded as energy intensive industries. You're up there with them on that basis. If you look at a typical office operation, they may be lucky if energy costs are 1% of operating costs. So it is really significant. Now, it must be similar for all growers that you're going to be hit by quite a high percentage cost. But how does the ability to manage energy, can that make you more competitive against other growers?
I think me and Dave talked about this quite a bit. Our goal is usually not in comparison to other growers, because there's so many factors with other growers, what they're doing, who they're selling to. Our goal is to make sure that our efficiencies and our productivity is as high as you're going to get. So when I go out there, I don't compare my numbers to their numbers. I don't even have their numbers. Our goal is looking at the market price, looking at the global situation that we're in, being competitive to what this guy does and what this person does is And maybe that's why I think a little bit outside of the box, or we're a little bit unique to our company, is we're always the first one. So there's really, and I get this a lot from my bank all the time, to the point that they kind of leave, they kind of leave me alone, because our history shows that we've been doing the right moves, but when you look back, it just makes sense. I'll give you an example. LED's been around for a while, but really efficient cost LEDs only been around a couple of years with our industry. You got to look at that. When people look back and say, "Well, you could have been more efficient 5 years ago, 8 years ago," yeah, I can, but the efficiency numbers were different. Saving maybe 30% on your electrical load, but you got to remember, 8 years ago, a fixture was like 5 times more money. So when you put that on paper for your ROI, it doesn't make sense for the bank. It doesn't make sense for us to even introduce it to the bank. So it's all timing, it's all technology. I always compare our business, and really like any other business is, and I know we do fruits and vegetables, but I compare it with telephones and flat screen TVs and computers. Like, if you look at the original telephone, it was so expensive and didn't do much, or a TV or a computer. You look at today's computer, is your computer breaks down, what do you do with it? You change it and you buy another one. You don't even dare to fix it, because it costs you the same amount of money by the time you're done. So it's very similar to that. So in our case, our comparison, what we do is what it's our news. It's what's going on. That's basically what we do. And we're the first ones to put pen to paper to introduce to the bank. And then I agree with you, Dave. And then there's a little bit of copy, what this guy is doing, what this guy is doing. But there's always one of the first companies that has to start that trend.
Do you think that makes you a market leader acting like that?
People say that. I do it because I enjoy what I do. We're profitable at it, which is great. The banks lets us keep doing what we're doing. But yeah, you could say that, but we don't look at it that way.
Okay.
You do it for business reasons, not just to be the market leader, ultimately.
Yeah.
That's what you're driving.
We do it for our growth, and we're doing for other things, because our company really took off. We've been around for 30 years, but it really took off the last 10 years. Like, we quadrupled or 5 times more what the company was. And I think that has to do with the lighting and technology, 100%.
Louis, I'm going to ask this question about greenhouses, but I think it applies, quite frankly, to every sector. And that is, for our listeners, we find that most customers tend to be reactive in managing energy. That's kind of the second thought process. But from your experience, what happens when growers take a reactive approach versus a proactive? What do you think happens, or what's the difference if you're proactive? What benefits can you gain?
Well, our company, in my opinion, has been built on proactive, literally built on proactive. And it's hard to do because you can't compare what you're doing to somebody else, because it hasn't happened yet. So when it comes to financing and all this stuff, you have to have a history of good stuff for the banks to keep giving you for this new technology that hasn't even been done. And it's hard to say it hasn't been done, because obviously LEDs has been around forever, not forever, but quite a while. But to put it in a package with everything with a bowl, it's a little bit more difficult to present. So by being proactive, it's just less of a climb. When you're reactive, it's like everything else. It already happened. So if the coffee spilled on the table, you got to clean it up. It's going to take energy to clean it up. If you're proactive, you could see the coffee before it spills and move it to a safer spot. And that's kind of what we do with our technology, is we react to efficiencies based on the market. And the market tells us this year, next year, there's a trend. And once you see that trend going, then you have to make moves. And you got to remember, sometimes the technology is not there to make those moves yet. And we talked about this a lot, Dave. Would I love, battery backup, Would I love doing other things? Would I love putting, solar panels on my glass? Yeah, I would love to do that. We would be 100% self-efficient, but the technology hasn't happened yet. Eventually it will happen, but it hasn't happened yet. So the thing with technology, and I always say this to my consultants, you got to buy this light because this light is like 2%, 3% so much better than this light. And I tell to them really seriously, you understand when you're buying something, you're wrong right off the bat, right? You're buying the wrong thing right off the bat because every 6 months there's something new that replaces that. So do what you have to do, buy the best at the best price, and forget about the 2-3%. You react to the 2-3% with your because in 5 years you could change those lights over again for the new style and do the same way. Don't overreact. Don't look at the big picture. If that's 2%, don't worry about the 2% or the 3%. Worry about the rest. So that's kind of what we do.
I have a follow-up, and it's a response for you, but also John. So what I find here in North America, and again, I can talk about greenhouses or industry, but there's probably 5% that are proactive, and a lot of people are reactive on the energy front. So John, with pricing being higher in Europe, and you have been in Canada several times, do you find Europeans tend to be more proactive because of pricing?
But no, I think there is a mindset about energy, carbon, sustainability. I think there's particular mindsets that people have, and those people who've got that mindset will do something. What we tend to find with pricing over here is it's when we start getting a significant change in pricing, and as Louis suggested, those significant changes are always upwards, then we suddenly get people wanting instant action, instant solutions, want to get it put right there and then the price plateaus a bit and their intensity dies down and they take the hit. So it really depends. I think you made a comment earlier about leaders or leading industries, and the people who are leaders tend to be good at energy management. And that's because being good is doing everything a bit better, isn't it? It's not just
It is.
being very good at one aspect of your business. And I think we get that variability. But yes, high energy prices do impact on people's decision making. And despite a lot of thinking, I mean, just an interesting little sideline. I'm working on a continuing professional development article about the deployment of heat pumps for domestic heating. And the problem we've got here now is our electricity pricing has gone so wonky, it could cost you more running a heat pump than running a gas boiler. And that is leading to people saying, no, they won't go into that technology. Yeah, pricing can have an effect, but I don't think we can draw a nice, neat line and say, we're all good in Europe and you're not so good in North America. Because you're right, I think was it 26 times I've been over now, I think. And I think you have, in North America, you have players that are far better than some of the players over here. And equally, you've got some that are worse.
Fair enough. And Louis, coming back to you because you have a European background, do you think that's has an impact? I mean, as John said, has that kind of influenced how you think?
Something, I never thought about that, David, until you just mentioned that. I was born in Europe and I do travel a lot over there because I got a home there. Maybe in the back of my mind, it has some influence. What I know here is as bad as what it is, sometimes the pricing in Europe, I always said, we're just follow Europe all the time. It's going to happen here. It's only a matter of time. And it does.
It does.
So maybe that I prepare for that better because I'm there and I see it. And in the back of my mind, it's easier for me to translate over here. That's a good point. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Last point, because what we find in working with clients, we find Europeans, Asians, Japanese are way ahead in their thinking on how to manage energy. Now there's exceptions. There are some Canadian players that do, but the
Right.
truth is most of them are influenced, as John said, mindset, cultural, how they brought up, how they think differently versus Canadians or Americans. We've had this abundance of cheap energy. We just don't think
Yeah.
about it. I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, it's all based on need, right? So over there, they have a need to be more efficient. They don't have an abundance of energy. Whereas here, we're typically like, okay, just install a cogen. It's not that expensive relative to what you're making, right? So
Yeah,
a lot of people choose other solutions rather than being more efficient.
agree.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I remember in one of my first trips to North America, I was looking at the price of petrol, gas, and I saw what it was compared to at home. And I can remember saying to somebody, and they said, "Oh, so what car you got?" And I said, "I've got a diesel car. I can get 60 miles to the gallon out of it." And they're going, "Wow." It was only when I did the calculation that I realised we were both spending the same amount of money for a journey, because I had a high fuel efficiency car and high prices, and in North America typically lower prices, so there wasn't the impetus to drive the fuel economy.
Right.
I think we've talked about this in previous things. We can talk about sustainability, moral high ground and everything else, but at the end of the day it's dollars and cents or pounds and pence, isn't it, makes people make these changes.
I don't think too, John, that, and I'm not talking about business people at this point. I'm talking about people in general.
Yeah,
I don't think people understand what sustainability means. They think this green, and I'm all green, by the way, because technically our Golden Acres Farms is built on efficiencies, but we do it for two reasons, and we're a lot of times the first ones doing it. But foremost, we do it for the efficiencies to cut costs, and again helps the planet and the surrounding neighborhoods or whatever region you're in. But when you talk to people in general, and I get a lot of this, wow, you're spending so much money, you're spending so much electricity on something to grow, and you're spending so much gas on something to grow, and all these comments come in, and that's not sustainable. Okay, and I ask them, okay, you tell me what's sustainable. Building the garden in the backyard, the old-fashioned way. Okay, great. So basically, one, we don't have, you know, everybody's different temperatures, different climates, wherever you are around the world. So that's not happening. So you're okay not eating certain times of the year. Oh no, I'm not okay. We could always buy it from somewhere over in like Mexico or something. So basically, that magically appears in your doorstep from Mexico. You put no trucks in it, the pesticides, all this general stuff comes up. And by the time I'm done, I say this: you're right. We're not energy efficient, but nobody is. First of all. And second of all, our product produces so much based on this energy compared to outside field
yeah,
stuff. And second of all, everybody likes, so I'm talking about a whole different topic now. So everybody likes, fresh fruit. Because back in my day, you know, all the apples and all the oranges weren't perfect. There were a little dent here, a little dent there. It's great. It still goes in the store. Today's world, somebody sees a dent in a fruit or anything else, it's garbage. How sustainable is that? But you know what I
yeah.
Yeah,
mean?
it really
So
comes to
we could go on and on with this, but I think you got my point.
Yeah,
it's ultimately food security too.
Yes, of course
Ultimately,
it is.
yeah, but I think Louis touching on something. We've got a big thing in our podcast. We talk about, in the broadest terms, people being more educated about issues. One of the things that I find is issues like net zero and sustainability have become the
Yeah.
thing that everybody I know seems to have an opinion on, and yet has very little actual base knowledge. And you find it quite difficult at times when you have an understanding of it and you hear somebody, you're at a drinks party somewhere and somebody's banging on about this, that, and the other. And you think to yourself, do I step in and try and educate them, or do I just leave them to it, or what? And it is a problem. And I mean, we have seen, and I'm not going to go too far on this, but we've certainly seen here and we've seen in the United States how net zero policies and things like that have become very strong political issues, and those people arguing them probably don't fully understand them anyway. So, yeah, interesting problem.
And based on that, John, going
Yeah,
back to what Dave was mentioning about, Japan and all these countries that are doing something, their technology is so much better, and it is. You just hit it on point. Basically, they have a government
yes,
that helps them with this stuff. Our government, not to put our government down, because they do good things, but they're not proactive. They're reactive, and that's a problem.
Yes. Yes.
That's a
yeah.
big problem. They should be looking at the proactive stuff, and that's why we never could catch up, because it's every single time they're reacting to it instead of proacting to it. So we'll never catch up to it.
You have a very valid point there, and we see it here. Our government is trying to work out where hydrogen fits in for heating, but they've decided that they won't make a decision until 2026. And they've also decided that the research they were doing to support making that decision, they're not going to carry out. We end up with at least a year, 2 years, where people are going, is the government going to invest in hydrogen networks or not? And so what do you do during that period? You don't do
Nothing.
anything because you're scared of
Right.
doing the wrong thing. I
Correct.
think we've got to bring us back on track just a bit. You've talked about, well, David was getting you to talk about, reactive. What can you, particularly for people who've not worked in the greenhouse industry, could you give us an idea of what proactive energy management looks like in your operation? Something like the day to day, week to week. What does it look like?
Obviously in the summer times, it's a lot more work than it is in the winter times, believe it or not. You would think, oh, being so cold in Canada, people would say, well, it's a lot harder to keep energy management in the wintertime. But our electrical load and stability in the summertime is so out of whack. We keep on going to our own generators, basically self-generator in our place because of the how should I put that, Dave? How does that work?
Yeah, let me help you out, Louis. So in Ontario, for our listeners, we have peak grid conditions, and effectively customers are motivated to reduce their peak to reduce the Ontario grid peak.
Right.
And if you do so, and it's 5 peaks you have to hit for the whole year, and most of the peaks, as Louis was conveying, tend to be in the summer. So if you can figure out when those peaks are, and if you can shed your load or reduce the load that you need from the peak, you get properly rewarded for doing so. And
Everyone's gotten really good at it lately. So what happens is if everyone's peak shaving, then the peaks change. So in the summertime, it becomes more difficult because more and more companies are used to peak shaving. So you need to be on guard almost 24/7 to make sure that you're off on those peaks, or you will have a hefty energy charge for the rest of the year.
Right. So based on our everyday energy savings here is, you know, we got today from two curtains. One is blackout. One is blackout and energy. The other one is clear and energy. And what those two do is one is for the daytime, so we can get the sun through our curtain in the wintertime. So we're talking wintertime now. Our sun through our curtains, and it's like an insulation that keeps the heat inside the greenhouse during the day. At nighttime, where it gets colder, we use our second curtain, which is our blackout energy curtain, which does two things. One, it keeps the light from going outside of our greenhouse to keep it more inside of our greenhouse, and that way it doesn't affect our neighbors. But the biggest thing that helps us is keep the light contained as much as we can inside the greenhouse. So the more light we have inside the greenhouse, the more productive it is to grow our crop. So there's two factors to that. And obviously the LED lighting is basically, 16 to 18 hours in the 24 hours we're lit up like it is a summer day anywhere in the world. So by doing that, all that energy that we're spending, and I always said this, is when you spend something, you want to keep it. You don't want to discharge it into the environment. People have a weird way of doing things that they just can't do it. But what we're trying to do is every penny we spend in here, We don't want it to go away. We want it to go productively into that crop. And that's kind of where our efficiencies when it comes to our facility compared to other facilities there, because we could compare our numbers. We're usually about 10 to 20 to 30 and even more percentage higher than our competitors. I hope that makes sense.
In an efficient way.
Yeah.
Right, Louis? Yeah.
So, I'll give a little bit of background on my experience in the greenhouse industry. I started getting into it in 2019 for a senior project, and Louis was actually the first grower I've ever met. And I remember before I met you, I Googled your name, obviously, and I found an article, and it's actually from 2015. The title of the article is Louis Pleads for Year-Round Growing in Ontario. So that was 2015, where year-round growing was still not a popular thing. I remember being in the industry in 2019, and it was some greenhouses had HPS, but a lot were still like, is this lighting thing even worth it? It's investing in lights worth it. And then those who had invested in HPS were already onto their LEDs by the time some greenhouses caught up. So I just think of how much the industry's changed in 10 years, and let alone the last couple years, even like you mentioned, Louis, the blackout curtains. So before, there were no lights, so there were no need for blackout current to protect the environment, to protect the neighbors, to conserve the energy. So it's funny to listen now, because I remember even 5 years ago, a lot of this stuff was so new and everyone was freaking out anytime anything new got brought up. So a lot has changed. But on that note, how far ahead do you plan your energy strategy, and what drives those decisions?
Us in 360 are always trying to plan ahead by a few years. Unfortunately, the market is going faster than our planning is, so that one kind of beat us a little bit. But on the other hand, we have a lot of, I'm going to compare it to like a Ford or a Chrysler manufacturer. Their power is consistent. They need it. They can't stop it. Once they go, it's on. There's no off or on. With our agriculture, we can manage our power based on what the market price is for electricity compared to what the market price is for our product. And we could decide how much money of energy can we apply to our product to obviously harvest more. Sometimes harvesting a little bit less is better than not paying the price on the market price as far as electricity. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. And truthfully, Louis, not many growers actually understand that.
Well, okay. Yeah. I think you should.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
I think you should.
Can you share an energy decision that made a major difference to your bottom line?
An energy that made the biggest difference to my bottom line?
Yeah.
Listen, I think every decision we made for efficiencies has affected our bottom line, whether it's, gas efficiencies based on curtains, whether it's robotics based on labor. But our biggest one has to be lights, and the way that we grow with lights. Like even today, I was at somewhere. I was at a birthday party this week, and we were talking with some colleagues that are in the same business. I even see them being excited, which for me, it's done, it's past. But we always talked about this. I used to say, I usually have 5 years ahead of the industry. It's more like 2 or 3 these days, years ahead of the industry. And I could see that what they're talking about to me is what I was talking 5 years ago. And I could see that they get it. So they are getting it. It just takes a little bit of time, or maybe a little bit of the finance world to encourage them. Oh, this guy is doing really good over here. And it does have some impact on that too.
For sure.
So lights, it would be the number one for me. Yes, for sure.
Now, I've got a question. What do you think the next big technology development's going to be that's going to impact on greenhouses?
That's a hard one, John.
I know it is.
There's a lot out there. They just haven't got to fruition yet. We do a lot of robotics too for our warehouse packaging. There's a lot of robotics being placed for the greenhouse industry itself. I know we're talking about energy, but if you just change one thing, it's going to help you, but it's not going to affect your business with a really impact. The big impact is you have to do all these little things to make everything work. and that gets expensive and costs a lot. But the reward is there to. In Europe, as you know, is especially in Holland, they had energy crisis prior to us, and they're still higher than us. The guys that were going all out with cogens, with lights 15 years ago, plus 15 years ago, those are the guys that are still there and big companies. All the guys that didn't do those decisions back then, they're not there. They've been bought
Yeah.
out by the bigger companies or they've been going away. And guess what? It's no different anywhere else. It's going to be the same thing. You just got to look at them and then at least, I always say, listen, at least, there's an indication for you to react now because you see what's going on over there. But people don't see that. And that's why I always say, I don't really bother with my neighbors because we're in the same level field with my neighbors. I gotta see what I gotta compete with later on. And the world is really small these days. Product has moved all over the place. So
So Louis, I'm doing a slight modification as John to the question. So, you discussed that how greenhouses actually enhance food security in your piece. I just came back from Europe. I was asked to speak to NATO on energy security. And that's an issue certainly in parts of Europe. I would say most North Americans don't realize or think that is the case here, but we have customers. There's even greenhouse customers that don't have access to energy. And I actually believe, Lysandra has been involved in this as well. We actually think the greenhouse sector could help with energy security.
agree.
I'm wondering your thoughts. And again, the markets have to make sense. It has to make economic sense. But I know in Holland, they use greenhouses quite a bit for producing energy. Do you think there's a role or should be consideration, if it makes sense, to be clear, it has to make economic sense. Can the greenhouse sector or could they play a factor in ensuring that we have enough energy capacity in the markets? Again, for our listeners, it doesn't matter where you are in North America, there will be capacity constraints. People just don't know this yet. And I think the greenhouse sector could be a major assistance in that piece. So I'm curious on your thought process about that.
Yeah, I totally agree, Dave. And again, here's the thing. You need a government, and I know governments are busy with other things and there's so much going on in the world. Last thing that they're worried about is greenhouses to a certain point. But we always talked about this, Dave. Like, there's so much energy in Leamington. Like, you have to understand. Like, we have boilers to heat, to make hot water, CO2. I do believe cogen should be here in Leamington 20 years ago, not even now, 20 years ago, should have been here in Leamington. And they are. The problem with that is some of these contracts that with hydro or electricity are, the banks, they're not finance friendly. So people get nervous about these things. And I think I told you this before, Dave. I'll buy the cogen. But once I buy the cogen, you're buying my power. Because you're buying power anyways, so buy my power. Why not? It's Canadian power for Canadian citizens or whatever, because we need that power anyways. So you buy my power, and we'll work out a deal somehow, some way that's benefit for both sides, and it has to be benefit for both sides, the consumer and us. But I think it's a waste of energy, and that's what drives me nuts a little bit too, because there's so much waste of energy that we do when there's a need for all this power, and Leamington is a hub for power. You want to make it more interesting? Put greenhouses around Toronto, put greenhouses around, and use cogens, not only to, give your energy to your greenhouses, but in the summertime and off peak, put it back into the grid and sell it to your customers. Is it perfect? No, there's no such thing as being perfect. Is it the most efficient way of doing it? And Holland is doing that today. They've been doing that for years. And the reason why they do it, because they know they need the power, and there's enough greenhouses that could manage some of that load without building another Bruce plant or something of that nature, right?
Right.
Just use
That's
some of that to cut the costs for our taxpayers to build some other thing that we could
that's
help with them right now.
That's what makes the greenhouse industry so interesting to me, especially when I first started learning about how much power they use. The power that's used at a greenhouse is generally during off peak hours. It's in the
Mm-hmm.
winter months, in the middle of the night when everyone's asleep and
Mm-hmm.
no one else is using power.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, we're talking like 20 megawatts worth of power for maybe one greenhouse, depending on their size, right? So this
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of power. And I think that it's unfortunate because I don't think we properly plan industry wise, but the perfect grouping is honestly a greenhouse space in a certain area and then a bunch of companies like Ford Stellantis in another area where it's one is using it in the daytime and one is using it in the nighttime. And in the summer, greenhouses use very minimal energy.
Right.
They cut it down by
Well,
what, like 95% probably versus what you use.
100% of, yeah,
Yeah.
95%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's really interesting because I think when people hear, oh, like greenhouses use this much energy, and anytime other industries get riled up about it, I'm like, you realize they're using it when you're not operating. They're
Correct.
using it in all the hours when we're all asleep and the plants are growing. So I think that's why it's maybe not leveraged enough, but it is the perfect balance. It's when everyone's on their 9 to 5, greenhouses aren't using the lights as much, right? They're using it at night. I do think that that's always a misconception about the industry.
No, you're absolutely right, Lysandra. And to the fact, to even the point, I know I told this story before, when Bruce Campbell gave me my 30 megawatts 15 plus years ago, and he kept on asking me, he was actually at this office where I'm sitting right now. He kept on, why are you the only one that wants 30 megs of power? You understand how much power that is? Trust me, I won't be the only one. And secondly, he kept worrying about, yeah, but in the summertime, we need this power back. Listen, I'll do even better than that. You can have a switch to shut the power off at my place anytime you want, winter or summer, it doesn't matter because I know he would never. And plus, half the time we're off anyways when he needs it. So it's a win-win for me. Reluctantly, he gave me that power, and that was the start of our light industry, I guess.
And for our listeners, I want to make sure when Louis says he gave him the power,
Yes,
he made it
thank you.
available. It wasn't a freebie,
Yeah,
just so
we paid
everyone
for
knows.
it. It was just available. Can I get that power and I pay you for it so I could use
Yeah.
it? That kind of thing. It wasn't for free by all means.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a gold mine nowadays to get 30 megawatts
Right.
in the
Oh
area
yeah.
when you're next to everyone who wants 30 megawatts.
Yeah.
It's really difficult, and that's why energy efficiency, especially for the greenhouse industry, is so important because again, if you're all in the same area, you're all fighting for the same amount of power to fuel your greenhouse.
Right. Yeah. I always say that 30 megs, whatever it could do back in the day of 15 years ago, it seems like it's a long time, but it's not. As the light efficiencies get better, you're doubling and possibly tripling the amount of light with the same energy that you were taking. So the efficiencies is growing with us.
I remember even when we were comparing like HPS to LEDs, it's like you can, with one greenhouse on HPS, it's basically two
Right.
greenhouses with LEDs the same
Yeah.
size, right?
Yeah.
It's a half.
And going back to the cogen sharing power with our community, even during the wintertime, because I think even in the wintertime, there's going to be based on how electric cars are going to evolve, based on a lot of things that's going to happen. Even power in the wintertime is going to be a challenge. So people don't realize that. By having the LEDs at that point in the wintertime, you could dim it to 50%. Half the power could go into our community. We could do whatever we want to do based on what the government needs us to do. We're probably the most friendliest, our industry is the most friendliest environment to work with the government than any other industry. And people don't realize that. People think it's only one way. No, we with our community, and people don't realize that.
Agreed. Well, this has been a great episode on navigating energy in modern greenhouse operations. To end off today's episode, what is the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
Don't be scared. Basically, be proactive rather than be reactive. It will pay off.
John, what's your biggest takeaway?
The biggest takeaway was the bit that just came at the end there about the flexible nature of the industry and how utilities, regulators need to understand that to maximise the potential that could give for everybody.
Thanks for that, John. Dave, what's your biggest takeaway?
The biggest takeaway, Lysandra, is mindset on how what restricts you and how it helps you. And Louis is one of those leading edge people that has this mindset that he can overcome any problem and is proactive at doing it. That's the difference here, I think.
Agreed. And I remember, Louis, when I first met you, I always thought you were in your own lane. And I think that's still true. And you do things because you genuinely believe in them. And I always think that's the best way to make business decisions because, again, you can just speak to it all and it's something you truly believe in. So that's something we've found with all of our leaders in the Leader Series.
Thanks, guys, for the kind words.
All right. Well, have a great day, everyone.
Deserved.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode of the 360 on Energy and Carbon podcast. Thanks for listening. Make sure to check us out on our website at 360energy.net and follow us on LinkedIn at 360 Energy Inc. Tune in to our podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, Anchor, or other listening platforms by searching the 360 on Energy and Carbon. You can watch the video recording and subscribe on YouTube at 360 Energy Inc. Email us your feedback at podcast@360energy.net or comment on our LinkedIn posts. See you next week.